A little bit.
There is so much joy in the smile of a child, especially when the world is bright and everything is new. It is a privilege for caring adults to keep a child's life as safe as possible. Yet we know too well that there are those in this world who would harm children in order to meet their own selfish needs. And if no one stops them, they will continue to abuse. Adults must work together, agreeing to work harder than ever to learn how to build a wall of protection around all children.
I was 10 years old when I was molested. I had to face my molester every day, not knowing if he was ever going to mess with me again. And he did do it. Again, and again, and again.
I was 12 years old, and I felt dirty and ugly. I felt like no one would ever love me again.
I tried to kill myself when I was 15. I just didn't want to go on living. I hated myself. I blamed myself. I just thought it was unbearable. The pain, it was just unbearable.
I was in middle school when I first met Mike online. He became my best friend. Actually, I loved him, and I thought he loved me. What he did to me really hurt.
For most adults, the mere mention of child abuse creates anxiety. Although it is not a pleasant subject, to prevent abuse, adults must face any fears and learn about the nature and scope of child maltreatment. Through awareness and education, this training module will help empower you to assist in the prevention and proper response of abuse. We first learn about the facts of child abuse. Child maltreatment is the term used to refer to all types of abuse and neglect of anyone under the age of 18 by a parent, caregiver, or other person with the responsibility of safeguarding the child. This includes coaches, teachers, clergy, volunteers, and others. The four most common forms of child maltreatment include physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and neglect. Research tells us 1 in 5 children will experience some type of abuse before they're 18 years old. It's important to note when children are exposed to one type of abuse, they may also be experiencing other forms. Every type of abuse causes harm to children. In some cases, that harm is visible, but in many cases it is not. The effects of abuse can be immediate or may last for many years. It's also possible for children to abuse other children. Neglect is the type of abuse that occurs most frequently. It is the failure to meet a child's basic needs, including housing, food, clothing, education, and access to health care. Infants and younger children show signs of neglect when they fail to develop and grow appropriately, or appear malnourished. In older children, other signs of neglect may include improper clothing for the weather, a lack of cleanliness, body odor, or inadequate medical or dental care. They may come to school or activities hungry without food or money. Older children may have poor eating habits due to unhealthy caloric intake and/or little supervision, and may appear to be underweight or even overweight. Coping with stress at a young age may result in anorexia, bulimia, or obesity. Physical abuse is another type of child maltreatment. It is the use of intentional physical force or other show of force against a child. The physical abuse of children can result in permanent physical harm and even death. Signs of physical abuse include unusual or frequent bruising, burns, unexplained broken bones, or other physical marks. Also referred to as verbal or psychological abuse, emotional abuse is any behavior that harms a child's self-worth or emotional well-being. It includes name-calling, shaming, rejection, threats, withholding love, isolation, humiliation, and belittling a child. Wounds of emotional abuse are often hidden from view, and so we must look beyond the physical to see the harm that is caused. Signs of emotional abuse are when the child exhibits low self-esteem, developmental delays, speech disorders, is anxiety-ridden, overly compliant, or shows defensive or age-inappropriate behavior. Sexual abuse is a type of maltreatment that is often hidden and challenging to identify, requiring an examination of many aspects. Sexual abuse is any sexual activity with a child, whether in the home by a caretaker, in a daycare situation, a foster residential setting, or in any other setting, including on the street by a person unknown to the child. The abuser may be an adult, an adolescent, or another child. Sexually crude language and sexual harassment behaviors could also be included within the realm of abusive behavior. The vast majority of child abusers are known and trusted by the children they molest. Only 11% of child sexual abuse is committed by strangers. Children rarely lie about sexual abuse, and often don't even report it. When they do disclose, less than 5% of their allegations are intentionally false.
These are not isolated cases. Understanding that child sexual abuse research studies have limitations and should be used with care, giving special attention to the scope of the analysis, parameters of the study, and abuse definitions. They show that the numbers of children who are sexually abused by adults are alarming.
Well, between 5 and 10% of adult men say they were molested as kids, and the number is 20% for adult women.
According to research, 1 out of 5 girls and 1 out of 10 boys will be molested by an adult before they are 18 years old. Sexual abuse often begins gradually and becomes more aggressive and explicit over time. This is part of the grooming process molesters use to gain the trust of their victims. While not all child sexual abuse involves physical contact, touching a child in a sexual manner or touching their private parts for any purpose other than to keep a young child clean and healthy is sexual abuse. Additionally, forcing a child to touch the private parts of an adult or older child is sexual abuse. Sexually abusive, non-touching behaviors include voyeurism, for example, secretly watching children as they undress, speaking to a child in sexually explicit language, showing children pornography or forcing them to watch sex acts, and soliciting children through the internet for sexual purposes. In addition to effects such as anorexia or bulimia, a higher tendency for substance abuse, and difficulty with trust in intimate relationships, research confirms that child sexual abuse can also lead to chronic health issues such as diabetes, liver disease, and heart disease. In fact, all types of child maltreatment cause long-term consequences that affect the victims and even society at large. The ACE study, which involved over 17,000 participants, demonstrated that there is a direct link between these adverse, traumatic childhood experiences and the continuing health issues suffered by many adults. Problems that are often associated with child maltreatment include substance abuse, intimate partner violence, teenage pregnancy, anxiety, depression, suicide, diabetes, ischemic heart disease, sexually transmitted diseases, and obesity. Overall, abuse impacts the body's ability to grow, develop, and to heal itself. Learning how victims are affected and how abusers operate helps us to combat abuse. Preventing child maltreatment is an important responsibility for all caring adults and an essential part of building a solid foundation for a happy, healthy, and productive life. We are not helpless. When we work together, we have the power to protect. In some cases, we know how offenders prey on youth and we can prevent the abuse before it starts. In other cases, we know some of the red flags that would cause us to intervene and stop the abuse from continuing. There are 5 steps for you to follow that will help protect children in your community, and even your family, from the terrifying ordeal of child abuse. The steps are: know the warning signs, control access through screening, monitor all programs, be aware of child and youth behavior, and communicate your concerns. Step 1 is know the warning signs. encompassing the risky actions of potential offenders or even people with poor boundaries. There are warning signs that indicate an individual may have an inappropriate relationship with a child. Child abusers employ a grooming process to gain access and build trust between children, their families, and the molesters. The manipulative process includes physical, psychological, and community grooming intended to create an environment that traps children and lulls families into complacency. Do keep in mind that if an adult is exhibiting any of these warning signs, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's abuse. However, it's a red flag and must be addressed. Warning signs that characterize risky behavior include adults who use sexually explicit language and off-color jokes to desensitize youth, who give children gifts without parental permission and then tell the children to keep it a secret, and who show children pornography. Please note that even apart from the grooming process, showing pornography to a child is illegal and may even be considered actual child sexual abuse. One of the more concerning warning signs is when the adult isolates the child from others who could observe signs of abuse or neglect, or an adult who always wants to be alone with the child, discourages others from being around, or arranges to be with the child in areas without monitoring. Adults who allow children and young people to do things their parents would not allow them to do are also exhibiting risky behaviors that could be part of the grooming process, whether the permission is for something as simple as a snack, or as potentially harmful as drinking alcohol, or even unsupervised internet access. No adult should ever allow children to do things their parents would not allow without their permission. Another concern is when the adult consistently relays poor behavior, saying the child is unreliable in telling the truth or continually acting out. Observe if someone constantly makes excuses for the child's inability to participate in activities, saying they were injured due to clumsiness, are being punished for misbehaving, etc. The individual might be very demanding or controlling, or on the other hand, could express indifference for the welfare of the child. Other warning signs are when the adult often criticizes, frequently yells, threatens, bullies, humiliates, or belittles children in their care. It's important to recall that children can also exhibit risky behavior and can abuse other children. Note risky behavior performed by other children, particularly during overnight field trips, camps, or events with isolated areas and non-structured activities, where there's a greater risk of abuse because of the potential to be outside of the sight and hearing of caring adults. There's also opportunity for abuse through technology.
When a child or young person uses an electronic device with the internet, they may be subjected to inappropriate materials or even strangers without an invitation. They can be victimized in a variety of ways, such as cyberbullying or even sexual exploitation through social media, technology apps, or even new internet friends who are not what they seem. Many of the electronic chat features between electronic devices allow for private, one-on-one messaging between individuals. In many cases, these private chats may have webcam or video capabilities, allowing one or both participants to hear and see each other in real time.
Because of the charm and seductive talents of molesters, young people should be warned that whenever they communicate with someone using technology, even if just chatting about homework within an internet gaming site, they should never provide technology-facilitated friends with personal or identifying information, like hometown locations or school names. Even apart from conversation, an innocently posted photo taken at a school can also contain personal information in the background, in addition to tracking information that's embedded in the metadata of the photo, such as the actual GPS location of where the photo was taken.
It's very easy for a child molester to slip into a child's life. All they got to do is show the child any attention, especially if the child feels like they're being neglected at home. Well, then the child molester, he picks up on that and he says, well, what kind of parent would do that? I just can't believe they'd not let you do this. And they become their friend, and boy, if I was your dad, I'd let you do that.
This is a staff-only area.
Another warning sign among child predators is that they don't believe the rules apply to them. Watch for situations where an adult keeps ignoring standard policy or bends the rules with kids, such as letting them get away with things their parents wouldn't approve of.
Some who work with children fear that their care for and commitment to children will be seen as grooming. This is another reason it's so important to identify potentially risky behaviors. Knowing the warning signs and intervening when behavior seems inappropriate protects both the children and those who genuinely care for them from unsafe or even dangerous situations. Pay attention to the behavior of others and to your own interactions. Notice whether anything you are doing could raise concerns about your intentions or perhaps create an environment that opens the door to a perpetrator. For example, are you overly physical with children? Do you criticize them excessively? Are you teaching them to tolerate certain types of physical touch or verbal language from others? Your behavior might condition youth to accept behavior from another that they would normally resist. Perpetrators will take advantage of these actions. Instead, a good acronym for caring adults to use is PAN. While children need physical touch and affection, the behavior must be public, appropriate, and non-sexual in nature. Step 2 is control who has access to our children. Abusers come from all income, racial, religious, cultural, and other demographic groups. They don't have a particular appearance or look that distinguishes them from others. Controlling access to children requires us to set up and follow a screening process before the individual begins the position that puts obstacles in the way of a person who does not have good intentions or could cause harm to a child. To control access, require an application for all staff and volunteer positions that involve children. Complete face-to-face interviews with all staff and volunteers who will interact with children, and use that opportunity to communicate the commitment to keeping children safe. Require criminal background checks of everyone who works with children, check references, and ensure that all volunteers and staff receive proper training about the safe environment expectations of their roles in accordance with the policy and code of conduct. Remember, no one is entitled to work with or care for our children. We only entrust our children to those who have proven to be protectors of their safety, and we willingly participate in these activities because we're committed to building a wall of protection around the children in our care. Step 3 is monitor all programs. Monitoring programs includes managing the physical environment and creating a sense of transparency in all locations, whether they are on-site or off, such as a field trip. In this step, we're aware of the location's policy and code of conduct, so we can ensure our own compliance involving the monitoring of activities. Adults need to know where children are at all times, and should only meet with them in areas where other adults may see what's occurring. This means that we must also identify and provide extra monitoring for secluded areas. In addition, adults must pay attention to those times they spend alone with children, and make sure others are not only aware of the meeting, but that they know they're invited to drop by or stop in to observe any interactions. Creating an atmosphere of openness and transparency can make a real difference in the safety of the environment. Here we encourage observation and partnership to protect youth. Programs involving children should be sufficiently supervised. Establish an appropriate adult-to-child ratio and make certain each program meets that standard. Don't place older children in charge of younger children without adult supervision. This is important for all environments that have programs for children, and is especially applicable in a camp, trip, or mentorship setting. Step 4 is be aware of child and youth behavior. This step is twofold in that we're more vigilant to the potential signs of abuse on behalf of children, and we also learn ways to communicate with them regarding that behavior. Child abusers look for youth who are more isolated or sheltered. Children whose parents are open and straightforward with them in conversation are less likely to be victimized. Parents and caring adults should encourage children to speak up when someone does something inappropriate to them, or shows them images or videos they know they shouldn't see. Be sure to let children know that they will be believed and will not be in trouble if they view the material or felt like they did something wrong. Whether it's your child or a child participating in a program in which you are present, stating clear expectations and observing their behavior is a key part of being aware. Open communication regarding technology-related activities is also important. Recall that when a child or young person uses technology, adult content can come into their environments before they realize it by way of pop-up ads, cyberbullying, or meeting a so-called new friend. Pay particular attention to new relationships between adults and children that seem inappropriate. Relationships can also quickly develop between more vulnerable children and older, more assertive youth as well. Adult supervisors should be attentive to these relationships and act accordingly to assure a safe environment. For emotional abuse, notice if any of these signs and symptoms are appearing in the children around you. Be aware and pay close attention when children exhibit fear, intense dislike, or detachment towards someone in their lives, and if they are extremely withdrawn or anxious about misstepping and doing something wrong. For physical abuse, note when children are constantly absent from activities, shy away from physical contact, act distrustful toward others, are fearful of going home, frequently have unexplained injuries, and wear inappropriate clothing for the weather, such as long pants or long-sleeve shirts to potentially cover bruising. For neglect, pay attention when children often don't have proper clothing in their wardrobe for the climate, when they are consistently unkempt with poor hygiene, are frequently unsupervised, without payment for activities, and constantly without food. There are also general behavioral changes that occur in child victims of sexual abuse. The difficulty for observers is that many of these behaviors may be symptoms of other physical or emotional problems rather than actual abuse. While not a comprehensive list, some possible indicators of sexual abuse include excessive bathing, withdrawal and isolation from others, use of sexually explicit language, acting out sexual behaviors, changes in schoolwork or habits, bedwetting, soiling undergarments, and other types of regressive behavior, substance abuse, and self-inflicted abuse. Although the existence of any of these behavioral signs doesn't necessarily mean a child is being or has been maltreated, these may be indicators that something is not right or is off, especially if there's a sudden behavioral change, such as,
It's bad enough being molested and then to have to go tell someone about it. And I just thought it would be better to keep it to myself and not tell anyone. Plus, I really didn't have anyone to tell. I was afraid I would get in trouble. And I couldn't tell my mom because I was afraid she might be mad at me.
Many children will deny having been abused or will even recant after telling. They're afraid of being blamed. They're afraid of being contradicted by a more influential person. They're afraid of what their parents, family, and friends may say. The molester may have even convinced them that they were at fault. But patient, non-judgmental listening will usually allow the story to come out.
Children don't always say exactly what they mean. Sometimes their body language or the way they say something is more important than the words they use.
let the children in your care know that they can tell you anything, that you'll believe them, and that they won't get into trouble for coming to you with a safety issue, that you're on their side and will help them handle any situation. Step 5 is communicate your concerns. To put a stop to child maltreatment in our society, adults and children must be willing to speak up, communicate concerns, and report suspected abuse. Most importantly, any time an adult has a reasonable suspicion a child is being or has been abused, it is the moral and possibly legal responsibility of that person to report the suspicions to civil authorities.
All states have laws that require professionals who work with children to report suspected child abuse. Many require everyone to report, not just confirmed cases, but even if they just have a suspicion. Some people find that hard because they're afraid they might be wrong or that they might alienate someone. But such courageous reports have rescued many victimized kids from terrible torment. You can even make such reports anonymously, and if you make the reports in good faith, you can't get into trouble.
You can find the phone number for the Child Abuse Hotline through an internet search or within a phone directory. If you are aware that a child is in danger of abuse at that moment, then call 911.
Children disclose in a variety of ways. Sometimes their body language or the way they say something is more important than the words they use. They may describe it as happening to a friend, talk about it like a story or a make-believe situation, or send up a test balloon to see how the adult reacts. When a child discloses abuse, there's an appropriate way to respond. A thoughtful and calm response from adults is essential in these situations and can have a profound impact on a child's ability to recover. First, provide a safe place for the child to speak without being overheard by other youth. Listen, do not overreact, avoid displays of shock or disgust, and be supportive. Let the child know they did the right thing by telling you what happened. Don't punish or scold them, and inform them that you'll be telling someone who can help them. Don't promise confidentiality or secrecy, but do ensure that you limit your sharing to individuals who need to know, such as your supervisor and the appropriate reporting authority. It's important to be truthful with the youth and keep reminding them how brave it is to come forward and speak up. An essential element of hearing a disclosure from a child is limiting questions. A child should be questioned to only obtain enough information for the initial report. All other questions should be left to professionals and appropriate state child protection authorities. Listening to a child's disclosure and suspecting abuse involves 3 action items. First, make sure the child is safe and secure. Second, stop the perpetrator from abusing this or any other child by communicating the information to the proper reporting authority. Third, assist the child and the family with professional services and the support needed to repair the harm and assist with healing. Another trigger for reporting suspected maltreatment comes when a third party tells you about the abuse. If that person is unwilling to make the report, regardless of the reason, you must make the call. Even if a child is molested by another child, swift and decisive action is necessary. The first phone call in any abuse situation is to civil authorities to report the abuse. Contacting either the police or Child Protective Services will provide greater guidance about the next steps for that particular situation. Once the civil authorities have been notified and you know what actions they're taking, the appropriate staff should notify the parents of all involved. It's important for staff to listen respectfully to the parents, to acknowledge their upset and outrage, but follow the protocol set down by authorities for dealing with the complaint. There is a distinction between communicating about risky behavior versus reporting an actual suspicion of abuse. When behavior isn't abusive, but does raise concerns based on the policy or code of conduct, you can call attention to the inappropriateness of the action by fraternally communicating directly with the individual and then relaying that conversation to a supervisor. Or if this causes discomfort, you could simply speak directly with the supervisor regarding the concern. However, if at any point you have a suspicion of abuse based on the behavior of the child or the adult, then you would need to report to the appropriate state child protection authorities. A link to the various reporting agencies by state will be available at the end of this training. We must be willing to trust our own instincts when we see something that just does not seem right, even when we feel reluctant to communicate our concerns. It's difficult to believe that someone we know could be abusing a child. Here are additional common reasons cited by adults for failing to communicate. I don't want to make waves. This reason assumes that drawing attention to concerns may cause trouble and demonstrates a fear of creating upset. Instead, creating and maintaining safe environments for the protection of children and adults should be the priority. I'm afraid of repercussions or retaliation. Fear of actions taken in retaliation against children, other family members, or oneself, including lawsuits, keeps some adults from communicating. Instead, caring adults should recognize that communicating a concern is not accusing anyone. Sometimes adults believe they need more evidence to communicate concerns. However, when someone's behavior is of concern to you, you don't need to know their intentions or reasoning, nor must you have evidence. The role of the caring adult is to report and communicate with the appropriate authorities, not to wait and see what else happens or to personally investigate and find proof. Investigating reports is the responsibility of the Child Protective Services in your state. Children may be especially vulnerable with family members or others they trust, or even persons their parents trust. Step in and communicate your concerns to relieve children from the responsibility of speaking against someone they love and trust. In far too many cases of child maltreatment, adults have noticed things along the way but did not say anything until it was too late.
Communicating our concerns is perhaps the most difficult of the 5 steps. We must find the courage to speak up, and we must speak up before it's too late. You will never know if your courageous action to communicate your concerns will save one child's life or protect dozens of lives.
As we continually progress in our mission to protect youth, we are grateful for people like you who have unselfishly volunteered your time and have enthusiastically embraced the concepts of these programs. You are an integral part of keeping children and young people safe. By working together, we can identify, prevent, and help to reduce the circumstances of abuse. It's up to us as caring adults and parents, all of us, regardless of our role in the community, to guide and protect the most vulnerable. Thank you for your willingness to serve and for everything that you do to protect children.